Fly I'm going to tie now is one of my favorite nymphs, and it's my Salmon Fly Nymph number 2, which is the second version of the fly, made a little easier to tie. We're going to use a number 4 Tiemco number 200R hook, and I'm going to put some 20 thousandths lead wire on it. Someone asked Charlie Brooks a long time ago, and I happened to be with Charlie, and he was tying a fly with his big stonefly nymph, and they said, "How many wraps of lead wire do you put on a nymph, Charlie?" And he was always kind of quick with an answer and everything, and he looked up and he said, "As many as I can get on that hook." So, and I have the same feeling. When I weight a fly, I want to put either lead wire or imitation lead, whatever we have, but I want to weight it as good as I can to get it down. If the fly's on the bottom, it's working. Now, again, I use about 140 denier or 3/0 black thread, and I'm going to run that thread right on through that lead wire to anchor it there, and then I'm going to cement it. Lee Wolf had a theory years ago when we were fishing in Madison and places. If you could tie a fly, especially a nymph, but tie a nymph, so when the trout grabbed it, if it was too hard, they spit it out like a rock. But if you could grab it and they could munch on it just a little bit and hang on it for a second longer, you might have the option of sticking them. And that was Lee Wolf's really thought on this. And then he alluded to the bass fishermen with the plastic baits. A big bass will grab a plastic bait and grab on, and they'll hang on to it for a second because it gives. So this is the whole premise of my fly here. What we're going to do here is put a little black buyouts on for the tail, and we're going to put just a little black dubbing on so I can separate the tail. That's all I want to do. So I'm going to put a little ball of black dubbing on. This is the easier version. There's 2 of these flies that I tie, and this one is a little easier, and I come up with it this winter, or last year, and actually fished it. So this is my new version, number 2. The version number 1 is a little harder to tie and takes a half hour. This one is quick. We're going to put 2 black buyouts on for the tail, and we're going to separate them with that little ball of black dubbing. And we're going to put them right on there so it looks just like that salmon fly tail. I'm not crazy about buyouts, but it's the best thing I found for tails on a big salmon fly, so I stick with it. I'd rather something different, but they look pretty good. Now here's the beauty of this. I'm going to put a little more cement on there just to hold it in. We're going to use bicycle tire tube. I tried automobile tire tube and it was way too thick. So I went to bicycle tire tube, and you got to wash the tire tube really good, piece of tire tube. And it's very thin. Now I'm going to cut it on an angle, pretty good angle, to get a nice working piece of material. Let's see, we're going to cut that one a little bit wider. Cut it on an angle, and after a while playing with it, you'll discover that what angle works best for you, but just kind of a tapered piece here. And that's going to be our abdomen on this fly. Now, it's not quite big enough, so I want to build that up with a little dubbing, and I'll go ahead and use dubbing on this one. Or if you had a little wool yarn, some kind of yarn with you, you can use a little yarn, but I'm going to use a little bit of dubbing. And I'm going to take this dubbing, put it on, and just to build it up just a little bit before I do that. Now we're going to tie this in first, and we'll tie it in at the point first and upside down. You'll find that there's kind of a rounded side on this tire tube, so I want to put the rounded side up and tie it in with the flat side up, so when I turn it over, good. Now I'm going to put the dubbing on, and I want to build just a little bit big underbody because this is a bulky fly, the salmon fly. But like I said, this fly lets the trout munch on it just a little bit. And again, with like all flies, they all work. I've tried everything on the salmon fly and the nymph. The one that I think works best for me is a plain black woolly worm with natural black hackle, weighted really well. And when I drift that down the box canyon or someplace and let that go right with the current and dead drift, right on the bottom, those trout grab it. So that works good. But this also works real well, and this has a little bit more advantage where it looks a little bit more like the natural fly. And there's several other things about it I like. All right, we built that abdomen up just a little bit, and we could use any kind of yarn, just kind of. Now what we're going to do is we're going to bring this around, and we're going to get it right now down to the tail, one, and we're going to spiral this up so we got just a perfect segmentation of this nice looking black bicycle tire tube. There we go. And then I'm going to take my thread and put it right where I want it. One wrap, and then always three. I always go with 3 wraps. That looks pretty good. Then I'm going to take the end of this and cut that off. And we're going to tie that in right on down along the shank. And then right about there is where I want my wing case to start. Now this, so far, this fly is exactly like I tied it on stonefly number 1, salmon fly number 1. The difference on this one now is that I'm going to do a little bit different type of a, I'm just cleaning off the, I didn't get that washed as much as I wanted to. Clean it off a little bit. Now that we got the abdomen done and nice and full and it looks like that body on a big salmon fly, we're going to take another piece of the tire rubber now and tie it right in on top, right where I want the wing case to start. That's going to bring right over on the top. So that looks pretty good so far, right in there. Now what we're going to do is put a little cement, always, and then we're going to put a little dubbing. And we're going to go back to the March brown colored dubbing, or a little tan Australian opossum is what I like. You could put a little orange in it too. This is a big salmon fly, has a little orange in it, but really you don't see that very much in the nymph. What you do see is sort of a tan color on the bottom. So we'll go with the tan. And again, make it fairly full so you can brush it out later if you want. We're going to do a couple of wraps of that. And now the secret ingredient. I'm a big believer in natural black hackle, especially on wet flies, but on beetles, anything I can get. So here's a real big webby saddle, natural black. And you can use a dye black. I'm sure it'll catch fish too. But my preference is natural black, so I got a great big saddle hackle. Nice and big too, so when those legs will stick out. This is a soft hackle, so what I'm after is that a lot of movement in that hackle as this fly is tumbling down the stream. Very interesting. I want that caught in there. Now we're going to dub it some more. This is an easy fly to tie. The other one's a little more difficult because I put all 2 wing cases and a cover on it, and plus I do legs separately, so it takes a little longer to do the salmon fly number 1, which work well too. But this gives you that body, the right shape, and I feel as though the trout hang on to it for a little longer, and that helps me catch fish. You're floating down the Madison, you put that out and that line stops, and that trout has got a hold of this fly and he munches it just a little bit longer than he would have if it was a real dark, or a real, not dark, but a real hard fly. And of course, I'm sure a natural insect, some of these stonefly nymphs are sort of like a nut on the outside. They're kind of hard. There we go with a nice thorax. Now we're going to take this hackle and we're going to double it around 2 wraps here and there, going down with 2 more on top of each other, and usually wind up with more legs than you want. You know, an insect has some 4, 6 legs a lot of times. It's been mentioned over the years, what's better, 50 legs or 2 legs? What's better? We don't know. But the hackle on it gives a little life to it, so that's what we want. I'm going to spread it out, and if I have to, I might take a couple of whacks off the top and maybe on the bottom if I want, but not too much. I want that hackle spread out on the sides so it really has some movement. Now we're going to pull that cover over, and I want to tie this right to the eye of the hook, right down to the eye of that hook. And let's see if we can get it nice and tight in there. Right, it's got to go right to the eye, right on it. Good deal. And then if you want, you could reach up here with your scissors and you can clip maybe just a little off the end, this end and that end, to make it a little thinner. Good. Now dubbing again. Maybe I better put a little cement on that. That doesn't hurt. A little dubbing in there. We're going to build a head on this fly. And you get fancy. At this point, you could put in a piece of monofilament. I use red 25-pound test amnesia or something, put it in and cut it off and burn it and have little eyes on the fly. You could do that too, but this is a very simple pattern. But the trick is to get an old bicycle tire tube, cut it in pieces, and wash it really good. You got to wash it good, get all that dust off it or whatever they use inside the tube. And it's like a chalk type stuff. Now, I've got right where I want the head. Now I'm going to bring this back over the top, this cover, and I'm going to form my head, and we're going to stretch it a little bit. Tie that head in nice and tight. 1, 2, 3 wraps. Use my thumbnail to get it nice and tight as I'm pulling. I want it tight in there. and then I'll do my whip finish. But I call this the Salmon Fly #2 because it's just a little easier to tie and a lot quicker to tie too. Now watch the top. You could leave a piece of that on if you want, but I just pull it, cut it flat. Bring this around here, make sure those legs are right where I want them. You could put a little cement on if you want to make it look a little more lively, I guess. We can I usually put a dab of cement and then take my finger and kind of spread it out because I don't want it too bright. Or if you want, you could put a little epoxy, like an epoxy nymph. But that's the Salmon Fly #2, and when that's drifting down the river, those legs are going to that soft tackle legs are just going to give you all the action you want.